you touched on that idea of the flipping of the demographic pyramid. As simple as I can do it, as best as I can do it, we need the pyramid is a lot of young people who work, who pay tax, who support the old people who no longer work, and some of them may have chronic issues and they mightn't have the affluence or the family to support them. So the government's healthcare system supports them. That foundation of people paying taxes to support the people at the top is now changing, and there's going to be a time when I think it's 2030 where there'll be more people over the age of 65 than there is under the age of 18 for the first time on this planet's history, which brings with it novel challenges, doesn't it?
It does. It absolutely does. And don't forget, it's going to get worse. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's going to get worse, because don't forget that the generation that are being supported at the moment, they're the boomers that have from the economics of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and therefore they've got the spare income to support their retirement, whereas the generations that are coming after that haven't got that benefit. So we're going to see a tipping point over the next decade or so of that moving into the first phase of this silver tsunami getting bigger and getting more scary, because the demographics are getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and we will get further and further into depopulation, which again is a novel challenge that we're not really used to, isn't it?
Exactly. And I'm sorry I did interrupt you, Andrew, but
no, go crazy, mate.
This is a very important point, because actually what's happening in the concept of longevity, of course, is all of the other transition that's happening with technology at a global level, whether it's transportation, whether it's energy, whether it's entertainment. Things are completely changing. So it's a very exciting future. And of course, what we all want to be, and I do echo Bryan Johnson's "Don't die," just don't die, because actually what's happening is really fascinating. And of course, there is the concept of longevity escape velocity, which is that you stay alive a year long enough for healthy longevity medicines to be able to extend your life by a further year. Conceptually, there's a potential of, dare I say, immortality at some point in the future. When that's going to happen, I don't know. I'm happy to just get to 90, having a good time. But actually, it's going to be a very interesting time for our children in the future, because they're going to be experiencing a completely transformed world, but also a transformed longevity of how they're going to participate in that world.
Yeah, I think Bryan Johnson's a great, he's the world's largest N of one, I'd guess he would say. What's he call himself? The most measured man in history. And it's great, but I think to those new to the industry, because often when I bring this up just out the door in the gym, when we have our conversation with clients, whether it be health coaching or just the general organic conversation that you have when you facilitate a session, a lot of people's first response is, well, there's already too many people on the planet. Overpopulation is destroying the environment. So why would we want to do this? And then the next thought that comes in, people that don't do their research, that just, the nano attention spans of people that scroll through social media and get 90 seconds of Bryan Johnson and probably totally miss the boat as far as the message that he's trying to send. What do you say to those people, in your words? What do you say to those people that say, and literally, mate, I quote from hundreds of conversations, why do we want people to live longer for? There's already too many people, there's overpopulation, and we're going to destroy the environment. What do you say to that point from the longevity perspective?
Well, I mean, you're asking, that's quite a deep question to respond to. So let's sort of pick it up.
I need your help, mate. I'm getting it all the time. I need your help.
So first of all, let's deal with the people living longer.
Yes.
Fundamentally, we are all going to be living longer. Obviously, when you look at the acceleration of extended lifespans, yes, there's been some blips. Obviously, COVID and such like has really changed some of the trajectory curves. But at the end of the day, what would have been, die in your 70s became die in your 80s. And people now, when people, relatives or so on say, oh, died when he was 85, some people have a reaction that say, well, that's really quite young, isn't it? Because the perception is that you probably go to 90. And if you're lucky enough to go over 100, well, the likelihood is that you'll probably be either, well, if you go over 100, you probably still will have your cognition, which is quite an interesting perspective on that, but you might not have your mobility. So the concept of this world filled up with old people is that, frankly, it's happening, right? So you can't stop that, because the trajectory that's created all of these old people started 80 years ago, right? Or 70 years ago. So the reality is it's happening. So what you've got to do is you've got to make sure that those people aren't a burden to society, because if you get over your 60s, that's when you start to become exposed to the diseases of aging. Now, I'm 56. I've had all sorts of tests, as you can imagine. I like to spout the lower numbers, but I've also got some higher numbers. But so when I take a test, there are some tests that put me very close to my biological age, or my epigenetic age is very close to my chronological age. So if I'm 56, sometimes I'll have a test that says, okay, Phil, you're 54, nice job, you're X% younger. But I've also had a test that's shown that I'm 10 years younger. And I've also had a full physical, which has shown that my body is 11 years younger. So obviously, the perspective of all of this is that really you're kind of you're as old as your youngest organ, oldest organ, effectively. So I might have, as I had in a clinical test, that I got a brain age of 30. Which is great because both my parents, or one died of Alzheimer's, one's got it. So I'm delighted that I'm managing to keep my brain and cognition in the way that it is, and I'm sure being active as a CEO is part of that, as is exercise, etc. But in reality, what we want to be in a position of doing is keeping people overall, whether it's their cognition, their physical health, their cardiovascular system, or whatever it may be, as close or as under that 60 as they possibly can be. And people are starting to understand that there is this plasticity to aging, which means that they can actually achieve that. And so what we need to do is we need to get that up into a healthcare level. Aging is the biggest correlation to the chronic diseases. So really what we want to be in a position of doing is just ensuring that those people that are coming, the generations that are born and are out there already, even the millennial generation and the Gen Zs, they're going to be contributing to this pool of older people that are coming. So you just got to make sure that back to what we said earlier, they had that very long health span period in their life, a compressed morbidity, and likelihood is that they may be dying in their hundreds in the future. And if they are, and they're working up until their 80s or 90s being a tax contributor, again applying careers worth of experience to younger people, then there's the value in that society. They're not a burden to the society. They're earning taxes and they're contributing to society. So that's what's very important. So it's a long answer to your question, and I can always remember, when I'm with people, I go, well, what do you do? I'm in the longevity industry. What's that? Same question. A world full up of old people. And I say, well, okay, fine. So let's say that there's a drug that you can take that means you won't get heart disease, you won't get Alzheimer's, and you won't lose muscle in your later life. Would you take it? And the answer is, well, yeah, of course I'd take it. So, well, duh, welcome to the world global population that's going to benefit from longevity, right? So it's a long answer to your question. I am passionate about it, as you can hear.
I appreciate it.
It's like, I remember back in the 90s when we talked about my earlier career, I was working in education and the healthcare space, and I can remember people saying to me, well, do you really think that doctors are going to use the internet? And it was like, well, yeah, look at it now. The whole healthcare system runs around the internet. But really, at the end of the day, this is what the chasm is all about. You just got to get people's industry and commerce over the chasm, but you also got the psychology that goes behind that as well.
Yeah, that almost you could call it the societal psychology of acceptance. Is a very interesting space. Of course, I was telling you off air how I curated an event here on longevity, and when you say to people, what age would you like to die, if you'd be very black and white, and just say, you get the voices from the room, 80, 85, 87, 90. And then if you say to those people, well, what if you're 87? Let's take a mean of the answers. Let's say if you're 87 and you still have good health, good physical health, good cognition, you have meaning and purpose in your life, you can support yourself financially, do you still want to die at that age? And then unanimously everyone goes, well, no, because automatically we revert to that idea of, the quote unquote, the old person's home, the retirement home where you go. And that day that you can't get off the toilet by yourself is a terrible day. And then the extrapolation of your life from that moment on, of 5 years of, mate, hell, can we say, if you're in that position? And my father is. So If you're in that position and you're listening, then wow, I feel for you and would love you to do everything you can. But you know what I mean? That's where our minds automatically go. The dreaded coming of age and the complications that come with it. But when you flip that equation and say, well, if you're still healthy, and then as you said, compress morbidity. Look, mate, if I check out in 5 weeks of hell, I'm okay with that. If I get 90 years and 5 weeks of, sorry, excuse my language, shit, I'm good. But if it's 5 years of that, then that's a totally different equation.
Yeah. And of course, ask anybody in their 80s, you know, do they want to die? What's the
No,
answer going to be?
yeah, no, because it's so real, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. That's really your awareness of mortality.
Yeah, exactly. And I mentioned earlier that we're moving into consumer products. You know, we're going to be bringing out for our readers and members of our consumer community, not the science side of our industry. We're going to be bringing out an age test, an epigenetic age test, so that people will understand where they're at. You know, we're trying to make it as cheap as possible so people can access this, and then they can work with that baseline. And what you're doing is you're not having a conversation with yourself in your 80s, you're projecting yourself to your 80s. And if you can be motivated to manage your age and to keep your bodily infrastructure as optimized as it possibly can be, and you can supplement in the right way, and you cannot be too crazy about gray products, you know, Ozempic being an example where we spoke to the researcher and he said, look, if you're healthy, you should not be taking it, right? So there's a lot of
muscle mass as well as fat.
Yeah, exactly. Because, you know, there are issues and side effects associated with most drugs, and obviously they're the same with these GLP-1s. People will fix that over a period of time. But yeah, so the point is that there are ways in which you can extend your lifespan, you can make it much healthier, but you know, it doesn't come with pain, right? It comes with effort. You've got to work on the basics. As you well know, you've got to be working on your sleep. You've got to be working on your exercise. You've got to be working on your nutrition. You've got to, you know, manage the alcohol. You've obviously got to be then looking and saying, okay, well, now I've got my baseline in place. What do I put on top of that? And I guess I'm sure we'll maybe get into that in a short while. But that's the point. You know, it comes down to the individual. So, you know, my wife and I are at N of 2, and we're a great little social experiment between the two of us. You know, she thinks that all the supplements that I take is nuts. She can't be bothered to motivate herself to exercise in the way that I do. Biologically, she's older than her chronological years, and with one test that we did, we found out that there was actually 18 years difference between us. She was 10 years older and I was 8 years younger, and we're both at the same age. We're both.
She's a cougar, your wife, biologically.
Well, I do say to people, she's actually old enough to be my mother, but that's